The year is 1876, and Sultan Abdulaziz of the Ottoman Empire is being deposed. The empire under his reign has gone through the closing stages of a period known as the Tanzimat Reforms. The Tanzimat Reforms were a dozen of interconnected decrees, edicts and laws made by the Ottoman government in efforts to modernise the empire. This period was enabled by sultans and individuals of the Ottoman government who were following Tanzimat philosophy. This is essentially the realisation that the Ottoman state was falling behind the rest of Europe and would surely face catastrophe if nothing was done. The resolution to this issue, in line with Tanzimat thinking, would be to modernise the empire in European fashion, also known as Westernisation. The first real step in this direction was done under the reign of Sultan Mahmud II, when he made significant changes at the government level between 1826 and 1839. Though not technically a part of the Tanzimat period, the changes removed significant constraints on future sultans, allowing them to enact reforms. His first major action was when he abolished the Janissary Court in 1826, an institution which by this point had become a bloated political entity that removed sultans and hindered reforms when it suited them. Mahmud II created a modern European-style cabinet between 1838 and 1839, capable of handling extensive and complex legislation that would be instrumental in the coming decades. Lastly, he continued a process of compulsory primary education and sent young Ottoman students to study abroad, especially in Europe. This last action would eventually create the environment necessary for the rise of the Young Turks. The Tanzimat period began on the 3rd of November 1839 with the issuing of the first Tanzimat edict, Hatta Sharif of the Galhane. Other notable reforms in this period were the Hatta Hamayam in 1856, the Waliyat Law in 1864, and the Ottoman affiliation laws in 1869. These reforms went a long way to improve the lives of the citizens in the empire, with the building of roads, establishment of local councils, and the introduction of new innovations like automobiles and the telegraph. Some of the groups who benefited most from these laws were minority groups who for the first time were gaining political representation and were now able to pursue a genuine path towards full citizenship. The flurry of beneficial changes created a reformist fervour among Ottoman citizens that developed into a reformist movement, pressuring the government into continuing with the reforms. The movement understood that further reform was contingent on goodwill from the sultans, who for the most part just had to stand out of the way to stay in the good graces of the reformists. There were to be consequences for sultans who were not willing to modernise. The first sultan to experience this would be Abdulaziz. After a period of being on board with the movement, he made efforts to consolidate power for himself by tracking back some of the reforms. Crucially, he tracked back the cabinet reforms made by Mahmud II, making further reforms a bureaucratic nightmare to implement, enraging the reformists. This was all made worse due to a period known as the Bulgarian Horrors in 1876, where Ottoman brutality towards its Bulgarian subjects attracted international condemnation. At the peak of the crisis, the Sultan was deposed by reformist officers and replaced by Murat V. Murat V then had a mental breakdown after only 3 months on the throne and was succeeded by Abdul Hamid II. The reformist movement by this point had begun to take on a mind of its own, agitating for guarantees of reform. It seemed like another crisis was going to rock the empire if nothing was done quickly. In response, the 33-year-old Abdul Hamid was pressured into implementing the 1876 Ottoman constitution, enshrining the rights of Ottoman citizens established in the Tanzimat Reforms and re-implementing a modern cabinet. It implemented a dual legislative assembly similar to the UK and the US, with an upper and lower house. This seemed to satiate the movement, content with their rights restored and an established government body to implement further reforms. Enemies of the empire noticed the changes the Ottoman state was experiencing. The Bulgarian Horrors made any international support of the empire impossible, leaving the Ottomans to fend for themselves if any of their enemies intended to make a diplomatic play against them. With a new sultan and an empire that had just gone through the most dramatic change in its history, the years following 1876 were always going to be difficult to navigate, and it will be a challenge that the Ottomans would never quite recover from.